Think of every incompetent leader you have seen rise, from history's tyrants to today's billionaires. The ones who made reckless decisions, yet somehow climbed higher. The ones whose mistakes were obvious to everyone, and yet no one dared to stop them. It feels like madness, does not it? A cruel trick played over and over again by history itself. But what if I told you? It's not madness, it's a design, a brutal cold logic hidden beneath the chaos, a strategy crafted long before you and I were born. A centuries-old truth whispered by one of the most controversial minds in political history, Machiavelli. He revealed that power rarely rewards the wise. It rewards something far more dangerous. Sometimes, it's not wisdom that leads to power. It's the perfect illusion of it. And once you understand this dark mechanism, you will never look at leaders or the world the same way again. Today, we dive into the uncomfortable secret hiding in plain sight, and the disturbing psychological forces that allow the foolish to outsmart the wise and rule them. In the early 16th century, amidst the chaotic political battles of Renaissance Italy, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli found himself banished from the world he loved most, politics. Once a respected diplomat of Florence, Machiavelli's fortunes collapsed when a new ruling family seized power. Accused of conspiracy, he was imprisoned, tortured, and finally exiled to the countryside, stripped of influence, purpose, and dignity. But it was in this forced isolation that Machiavelli penned the work that would etch his name into history forever, The Prince. Unlike other thinkers of his time, who fantasized about ideal societies and virtuous leaders, Machiavelli shattered illusions. He did not write about how rulers should behave. He wrote about how they do behave. His philosophy was cold, brutal, and unsettling. When it comes to power, morality is optional, and appearances often matter more than truth. At the heart of his thinking lies a chilling observation, one that still echoes across centuries. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. In other words, perception is power. Reality is secondary. Machiavelli understood that humans by nature are not truth seekers. They are appearance believers. They don't choose leaders based on deep moral character or genuine wisdom. They follow the ones who look confident, appear strong, and project certainty, even if it's all a carefully crafted illusion. This ancient warning reveals a fundamental crack in the foundation of leadership itself, a flaw that manipulators, demagogues, and charismatic fools have exploited ever since. It's not the most capable who rise. It's those who master the art of seeming capable. When you look at modern political figures, corporate executives, or social media icons who command millions despite clear incompetence, you are witnessing Machiavelli's prophecy in motion. Surface triumphs over substance. Style defeats wisdom. Confidence overshadows competence. Machiavelli saw it coming 500 years ago. And today, we are living in a world that proves him right more than ever. It's tempting to believe that intelligence naturally leads to leadership, that the wisest, most insightful minds will inevitably rise, guiding societies toward a better future. But Machiavelli, and history itself, tell a far darker story. In the brutal arena of power, intelligence can often be a curse, not a blessing. The traits that define genuinely intelligent leaders, deep thinking, self-awareness, and moral nuance, are the very traits that make them vulnerable in ruthless environments. While a wise mind carefully weighs consequences, contemplates ethical dilemmas, and sees complexity in every situation, the world often rewards the opposite: boldness without doubt, certainty without nuance, simplicity over complexity. True intelligence breeds hesitation. It forces a leader to pause, to think deeply, to acknowledge the limits of their knowledge. But in a world where certainty is often mistaken for competence, such thoughtful hesitation appears as weakness. Nowhere is this tragic mismatch more visible than in the story of Socrates. Socrates, arguably one of the greatest thinkers in human history, championed a life of questioning, of relentless self-examination. He famously declared, "I know that I know nothing," recognizing the vast ocean of human ignorance. Yet, despite his brilliance, Socrates was not celebrated as a leader. He was condemned, branded as a corrupter of youth, and ultimately sentenced to death by the very democracy he tried to enlighten. Compare this to the populist figures throughout history: Those who rise to power not by offering complex truths, but by providing simple, absolute answers to a confused and fearful public. Where Socrates offered doubt, populists offer certainty. Where wisdom admits, "I could be wrong," foolishness shouts, "I alone am right." The reality is unsettling. In the competition for influence, those who project unwavering confidence, even without substance, often defeat those who humbly acknowledge the complexity of reality. Scientific research backs this up. A controversial study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that intelligence correlates positively with leadership effectiveness, but only up to a certain point. Specifically, leadership effectiveness increases with IQ up to around 120. Beyond that threshold, additional intelligence can actually decrease leadership emergence. Why? Because highly intelligent individuals often struggle to communicate their complex ideas to a general audience. They can seem aloof, confusing, or out of touch, even when they are right. Meanwhile, simpler, more confident voices cut through the noise with clear, bold messages. Messages that people can easily understand and rally behind. From a psychological standpoint, the explanation is simple yet devastating. Human beings are cognitive misers. Our brains are wired to prefer simplicity over complexity, certainty over ambiguity, black and white answers over shades of gray. When faced with nuanced truths that require effort to understand, many instinctively turn away, toward the leaders who offer easy, comforting illusions. This is why, in moments of crisis, the world rarely turns to the philosopher king, who speaks in careful probabilities and cautious wisdom. Instead, it follows the loudest voice, the one promising salvation in a single, certain stroke. It's not that intelligence has no place in leadership. It's that intelligence, real, reflective, self-critical intelligence, often struggles to survive the brutal, primitive selection mechanisms by which power is won. As Machiavelli understood so clearly, it is not the depth of your understanding that elevates you. It is how confidently you can sell the illusion of understanding to others. If intelligence and wisdom are not enough to secure power, then what is? The answer is as unsettling as it is simple: confidence, even when it's built on nothing at all. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger published a groundbreaking study that revealed a dark glitch in human cognition. The less people know about a subject, the more they believe they are experts in it. This psychological phenomenon, now famously known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, shows that incompetence does not just breed mistakes, it breeds overconfidence. In simple terms, the less someone knows, the less they realize how much they don't know. They lack the very skills needed to recognize their own ignorance, and as a result, they project an aura of false certainty. And in a world where certainty is often mistaken for competence, this illusion can be devastatingly effective. Those who are truly skilled tend to doubt themselves. They see the vastness of what they don't understand. They hesitate. They question. Meanwhile, the fool barrels forward with supreme confidence, and the crowd follows. As Shakespeare wrote centuries before Dunning and Kruger put it into academic terms, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." In the brutal game of leadership selection, it's not always the smartest who win. It's the most confident. Consider the meteoric rise of Adam Neumann, the charismatic founder of WeWork. Despite building a company on shaky business fundamentals, Neumann captivated investors, employees, and the media with his unwavering vision and limitless self-belief. He promised a revolution, not just in office spaces, but in how humanity would live and work together. He spoke with absolute certainty, projecting an image of genius and inevitability. Billions of dollars flooded into WeWork based on his vision alone. But beneath the surface, the business model was deeply flawed, and eventually, reality caught up. WeWork's valuation collapsed almost overnight, exposing the dangerous gap between confidence and competence. Yet for years, Neumann's overconfidence was not just tolerated, it was celebrated. It created an illusion so powerful that even experienced investors and analysts ignored the warning signs staring them in the face. Scientific studies back up what history has repeatedly shown. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who displayed higher levels of confidence, regardless of their actual competence, were more likely to be perceived as leaders by their peers. Groups tend to reward those who appear certain, even if that certainty is completely unfounded. This happens because human beings are deeply wired to seek clarity and direction, especially in complex or threatening situations. A confident fool can seem far more appealing than a hesitant genius, simply because certainty feels safe, even when it's an illusion. This dynamic is not just about leadership, it's about survival. In ancient times, following a confident leader could mean the difference between survival and death. Our ancestors' brains were shaped by environments where fast, decisive action was often more valuable than slow, complex deliberation. But in the modern world, filled with complex systems, nuanced problems, and high-stakes decisions, this ancient instinct becomes a dangerous vulnerability. We mistake the loud for the wise. We confuse boldness with brilliance. And as Machiavelli would warn us, those who understand this flaw, those who master the illusion of competence, can climb higher and faster than those who humbly carry the burden of true understanding. Once in power, foolish leaders rarely leave their thrones by chance. They understand, whether instinctively or strategically, that their survival depends on surrounding themselves not with the best, but with the most loyal and least threatening. Machiavelli, ever the sharp observer of human nature, saw this centuries ago. In The Prince, he advised rulers to carefully choose their advisors, not necessarily based on talent or wisdom, but based on loyalty and submissiveness. He wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. And what happens when a foolish leader sits atop a hierarchy? They do not recruit competence. They recruit obedience. They build a fortress of mediocrity around themselves, ensuring that no one is sharp enough, brave enough, or smart enough to challenge their reign. This is the beginning of institutionalized incompetence, a slow, toxic spread of mediocrity from the top down. The decline of the Roman Empire offers a vivid illustration. Emperor Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, systematically replaced capable administrators with flatterers and entertainers who told him only what he wanted to hear. The results were catastrophic: political decay, economic collapse, and the eventual fall of one of history's greatest civilizations. In more recent history, Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe suffered a similar fate. Talented economists, judges, and civil servants were pushed out, replaced by loyalists whose primary qualification was personal allegiance, not competence. The result was economic devastation and political rot. Even in the modern corporate world, the same patterns repeat. Some CEOs build executive teams composed not of the smartest voices in the room, but of those who echo their views without question, creating companies that collapse under the weight of their own bad decisions. Psychology offers a chilling insight into why this happens. Homophily, the tendency of individuals to associate with others similar to themselves, plays a major role. Foolish leaders feel more comfortable around those who think and act like them. Smart, critical subordinates make them feel exposed, inadequate, and threatened. This links directly to competence threat theory, the idea that insecure leaders perceive highly competent individuals as existential threats to their own position. Instead of valuing talent, they instinctively suppress it, pushing away those who might someday outshine or challenge them. Over time, this creates isolated pockets, islands of incompetence, where independent thought is punished and mediocrity is rewarded. The deeper tragedy: once these structures are in place, they become self-sustaining. Weak leaders promote even weaker successors. Bad decisions compound. Entire organizations, governments, and societies slowly decay. Not because of outside enemies, but because of internal rot that started at the very top. Machiavelli understood this grim dynamic centuries ago. We are simply living in its modern variations. In times of uncertainty and fear, the human mind clings to one thing above all: certainty. Our brains, shaped by millions of years of evolution, are not built to calmly process overwhelming complexity. They are built to survive, and when survival feels threatened, whether by war, economic collapse, or even existential crises like climate change, the mind instinctively seeks simple, clear answers. This craving for certainty is not a minor flaw. It is a profound vulnerability, one that skilled leaders, and sometimes manipulative ones, have long exploited. When faced with fear, People do not follow the most intelligent voice in the room. They follow the voice that offers the clearest, most confident answer, even if that answer is dangerously wrong. Take, for example, the communication around climate change. Real climate scientists, those deeply immersed in data and scientific uncertainty, often speak in cautious terms. There is a high probability. Multiple models suggest. There are trade-offs involved. Their language reflects intellectual honesty. It acknowledges the complexity of planetary systems, the uncertainty of predictions, and the difficulty of solutions. But this very honesty can be politically fatal. In contrast, populist figures often present climate issues in black and white absolutes. It's a hoax. There's nothing to worry about. Technology will fix everything without sacrifice. These messages are emotionally satisfying. They provide certainty. They offer escape from fear. And so, despite lacking substance, the simple narratives often win more trust than the nuanced truths. The uncomfortable reality is, when faced with complexity, many people don't want the real answer. They want the comforting one. Even among the highly educated, the bias toward simplicity persists. A fascinating experiment conducted at Yale University showed that when participants were presented with complex mathematical data about political issues, their ability to correctly interpret the data was heavily influenced by their prior political beliefs. Shockingly, the most mathematically skilled participants showed the strongest bias. They didn't use their intelligence to find the truth. They used it to justify what they emotionally wanted to believe. This finding shattered a comforting myth. More intelligence doesn't automatically lead to better judgment. Without emotional discipline, even the smartest minds become tools for rationalizing deeply biased conclusions. In other words, when certainty is desired, intelligence becomes a servant of emotion, not a guardian of truth. This love for simple answers opens the door to black and white thinking, a dangerous cognitive shortcut. Leaders who offer absolute solutions, only I can fix it, gain massive psychological power over those who feel lost and afraid. The more complex the world becomes, the more desperately people yearn for simplicity, and the more vulnerable they become to charismatic figures who promise clarity, no matter how disconnected from reality those promises might be. Machiavelli understood that perception matters more than truth. Modern psychology has simply confirmed it at a deeper level. In a world drowning in complexity, the loudest, simplest, and most certain voice wins, not because it is right, but because it offers psychological relief. And until we recognize this vulnerability within ourselves, we will remain easy prey for those who exploit it. If perception often beats reality in the pursuit of power, then morality, real, genuine morality, is often a liability. Machiavelli knew this harsh truth well. In one of his most infamous statements from The Prince, he wrote, "It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain his position to learn how not to be good." He wasn't suggesting that rulers must always be evil. He was warning that those bound too tightly to ideals of honesty, fairness, and virtue would inevitably lose to those willing to break the rules when necessary. In the brutal world of power dynamics, ethical leaders handicap themselves. Their commitment to higher principles restricts their options their ruthless rivals are more than willing to exploit. Consider the stark contrast between Cicero and Julius Caesar in ancient Rome. Cicero, a brilliant orator and a champion of republican ideals, believed in the rule of law, rational debate, and ethical governance. He clung to the hope that reason and virtue could preserve the Roman Republic. Caesar, on the other hand, understood power in Machiavellian terms. He crossed forbidden boundaries, made ruthless alliances, and seized control by any means necessary, including crossing the Rubicon with his army, an act of outright rebellion. Cicero's fate? Assassinated by political rivals after failing to save the Republic. Caesar's fate? Dictator for life, until his own assassination, years after fundamentally reshaping Rome forever. The lesson is brutal but clear. In a world of wolves, the sheep are devoured, not honored. The same pattern repeats in today's corporate environments. Research from the University of British Columbia reveals a disturbing trend. Individuals with psychopathic traits, lack of empathy, superficial charm, manipulativeness, are disproportionately represented in senior leadership positions. Their ruthlessness allows them to make decisions without being paralyzed by empathy or moral hesitation. Meanwhile, ethical managers who worry about fairness, long-term consequences, and employee well-being often find themselves sidelined, outmaneuvered, or burned out. This isn't merely anecdotal. It's a consistent outcome of what game theorists call the race to the bottom. If one player adopts ruthless tactics and succeeds, others feel pressured to adopt similar strategies just to survive. Over time, ethical constraints erode, not because good people disappeared, but because the system rewarded those willing to cross moral lines. Thus, morality becomes a weakness, not by its nature, but because of how competitive environments punish it. It's easy to despair at this dynamic, but understanding it doesn't mean abandoning morality. It means recognizing that power structures often favor those unburdened by ethical limits, and designing systems, where possible, that resist rewarding such behavior. Machiavelli didn't celebrate ruthlessness. He simply revealed a truth that polite society prefers to ignore. Goodness alone rarely wins. Strategy, resilience, and sometimes uncomfortable compromises are necessary to survive and to lead. While individual traits, like confidence or ruthlessness, play a role in who rises to power, systems ultimately determine whether competence thrives or incompetence spreads. In environments with strong feedback loops and transparency, incompetence is quickly exposed, mistakes have visible, immediate consequences. Failure is not easily hidden behind excuses or manipulated narratives. For example, in fields like surgery or engineering, where the results of failure are immediate and deadly, only the truly competent survive and rise. A surgeon whose patients consistently die cannot hide behind charm. A bridge engineer whose structures collapse cannot bluff his way into continued trust. Contrast this with political and financial systems where accountability is weak and outcomes are murky. The collapse of the Soviet Union illustrates how centralized power, combined with opaque decision-making, allowed gross incompetence to flourish for decades. Bureaucrats, shielded from real consequences, made disastrous choices without correction, until the entire system collapsed under the weight of its own failures. Similarly, the 2008 financial crash revealed how financial leaders, incentivized by short-term profits rather than long-term stability, made reckless bets with little fear of immediate accountability. When the system finally cracked, the damage was global. In both cases, the underlying structures enabled incompetence to rise unchecked. Competent systems reward honesty, transparency, and results. Broken systems reward loyalty, appearances, and short-term wins. Machiavelli understood that human nature is easily corrupted. Modern society must understand that only well-designed systems can consistently select for real competence, and without them, fools will always find their way to the throne. Power does not always belong to the wisest. It belongs to those bold enough to craft the most convincing illusions, and ruthless enough to protect them. History does not just reward intelligence, it rewards certainty, simplicity, and confidence, even when they are masks hiding deep incompetence. In a world wired to mistake appearances for truth, your greatest defense is not blind trust, but critical thinking. Don't be seduced by certainty. Question the surface. Look deeper. Machiavelli showed us that the game has never been fair, but understanding the game changes everything. Understanding the game does not make the world less dark, but it does make you harder to deceive. And sometimes, in a world ruled by illusions, that is the first true step toward real power.